Alrighty, guys. Since we have a 30-minute webinar for you today, we're just going to jump right in. And those that join late, we'll make sure to recap some of these things at the conclusion of the webinar. So welcome to today's GRIDSMART webinar training series, Site Configuration on the GRIDSMART Client. My name's Kristen Bridgers. Today, I'll be moderating this webinar, so that simply means that I'll be fielding any questions that you might have to our presenter, Justin Cox. Some of you may know Justin. Justin is the Senior Business Development Manager of the Pacific Northwest in Mexico here at GRIDSMART. Should you have questions for Justin during this webinar, please use the Q&A window to type your question. You can find that window in the control bar at the bottom of your screen. Simply click Q&A, a window will appear, and type your question. We'll answer it when available. We'll also be presenting you all with a polled question today. So you'll see a window appear on your screen. Click the option that best describes you or your company, and we will send some feedback on that. A couple of other items before we jump into today's webinar. We will be sending a follow-up to this training with helpful links and resources. Also, if you're interested in additional upcoming webinars, visit our website. Justin has it displayed right now, gridsmart.com/events, or follow us on social media on Facebook, LinkedIn, and Twitter. We'll be sharing all of our upcoming webinars for you all. So without further ado, I'm going to turn this over to Justin to jump right in. Justin?
Thanks, Kristen. Man, I don't know about the rest of you guys, but I am ready for baseball to start. I need some sports going ASAP. So for those of you who joined us last week, we reviewed the hardware for the GRIDSMART system and the installation components in the cabinet. That was led by Pablo Torres. The purpose of this webinar is going to be the site configuration through the GRIDSMART client. And the main idea is really just to give you a basic understanding of best practices on the total configuration of your intersections. For some of you, this may be a lot of review. Hopefully we can get to points where you have questions that we can answer and dive a little deeper. But generally speaking, we're providing a baseline of understanding on how to configure your GRIDSMART system. Next week, we're going to have a Smart Mount 2025, which is our fiber solution for the GRIDSMART camera. That's on our events page on May 6th. This is Eastern Standard Time, 1 p.m. Eastern Time. So all our West Coasters, just be prepared. I think when you register, it'll modify the time for you. But that's all here. All of our upcoming events and things like that that we're doing here on the web. As time goes on, our topics are going to become more advanced. Kind of introductory with our equipment and our software, and then we'll start getting into deeper topics. And then we have a poll that we're going to go ahead and send up, basically just your user experience with the GRIDSMART client. So when that pops up, just go ahead and answer that accordingly, and then that might help direct this conversation a little bit. And again, please feel free to answer questions as you go. So as we know, the GRIDSMART system is comprised of 3 components: the processor, the camera, and then the third component being the software client, which is what we're going to focus on today. The client, when you open it up, you have a few different views you can look at. This is the thumbnail view. Each one of these we call intersection cards. These are populated by directly plugging into the laptop port of your GRIDSMART GS2 processor. Or over your network, you can type in the IP address up in the search bar, and it'll connect to the site as long as you have communications over your network to that location. You can also search by typing IP addresses or other names. So we can type in Kingston, Pike, and North Shore, and I can filter out my view from there. Just a couple quick things here. At the bottom of these cards, you can see there's a Performance Plus module assigned to this one, nothing to this one, with the PED module as well. and then it shows you your connectivity. You can switch the view, and it will provide you with all of your intersections with a gray bar, meaning that it's never been connected, a green bar, which none of mine are connected, or a red bar saying that it's made connection before and it's unable to connect now. So this could be a quick dashboard to view your sites and their level of connectivity. And then the third view, we can actually turn on and off comms to sites over here on this far right column. And then you can see all your serial numbers, which serial numbers are important for setting licenses and support RMAs and things like that. And then the location, city, if you're a county or state agency, maybe you have a bunch of different cities identified without your sites. Otherwise, it'll be most useful for city agencies to search by site address. Back to the thumbnail view. One more thing to point out, there's an arrow on these sites that have two or more than one dot, I should say. So if there's no dots, that means there's just one camera on that site. 2 dots would indicate 2 cameras, and 3 dots, 3 cameras, and so on. And if you hit the arrow button, it'll toggle between your sites. And then just basic review of what we're looking at here before we get into the configuration. Right, this is the fisheye view that the camera sees. Obviously, we can flatten that image out by hitting the eyeball icon over here, and then we can click on the screen with our left mouse and hold and drag, and we can pan, tilt, and zoom. You've got a mouse wheel that makes things easier. Right, and then we can split the quad to a quad view. The computer's a little slow. Here we go. And then from the quad view, you can still pan, tilt, and zoom and set your viewing angle on each one of these windows as well. And then we click the 1, 2, 3, 4, and it goes back to a single view. And then this little dial, this shows us our settings for our masks and how we want to view. So when I view, I typically like to see just the detection zones, but here it shows you all your road masks and your object masks. So typically I will turn those off and view only the outline portion of the detection zone, but that's all preference. It's what you want to see. And these settings are only for your laptop, or your workstation. So as I made these changes here, anybody else that logs onto this exact same site will have their own set of settings, right? You know, individuals may choose to have some of these on or off, but in my view, I like to have them in this manner. So as I review sites, I always flip them over that. It doesn't mean I changed it for the site as a whole, only for this site. And then over here on the left-hand side is our menu. You just simply slide your mouse over to the side, and then your option menu pops up. Your configuration, which will be where we'll spend most of our time today, and then you've got some information on your site as well as data, which we'll do a specific topic on the data as well. So that'll be a few weeks down the road, but we'll talk more about reports and things like that. And then these things that are grayed out are only available when you're connected to a live processor. So since I'm not connected to any, these are all grayed out. All right.
Justin, it looks like the poll results are in.
Yeah, I see.
Perfect. So it looks like we have a lot of people that are beginner to intermediate. Thank you all for sharing.
Excellent. Yes, thank you. That helps steer. But please feel free to ask your questions as we go. And then Kristen will try and squeeze them in as we're moving through. In the info column here, there's just a couple of quick things that are really important to know. Your site version, right? This is an older site AGS file, so it's probably not the most accurate. Plus, I'm not connected to that site. If I was connected, it would show me the current version. But here's where you would see the site version, the serial number, and then obviously locations, and then you can see if you have any data modules. For some of us doing advanced features, this would be the API section, but, and then our changelog down below. All right, let's back up here. Let's jump right into the config. All right, I've got a fresh site that we're going to work on. So one thing to note real quick is there's this yellow bar on the bottom. As you see this is indicating that there's a new version of the client software. So my client software is currently running 19.3, but if I follow the link here to gridsmartcloud.com, log in, and if I don't have a login, I can just create a new login. Then I can go to downloads and update my client software with the latest version. You always want to keep your client software current because it's backwards compatible to your field. So all of your processors in the field running 19.3 or older, we can communicate to. But if a site is running 19.10, this client running 19.3 would not be able to communicate. So in fact, on the site card, it would be gone. There would be no site for that location because this software version is older than the one in the field. So keep your client software updated. When you see that bar, follow the link and get that site updated. I know that's challenging for some of you who have IT departments that require you to run it through them first. So I understand that, but ideally, let's keep that updated. All right, so first step, obviously, when we set up a new site, there will be a wizard that pops up and it'll launch you through these steps sequentially. So we may be a little out of order on what the wizard provides, but we're going to get through all of those same steps here today. So when we have a new camera installed, so this site has two cameras, an advanced camera, which we'll go through, and then a Bell camera. The first thing that we're going to want to do is the site settings for this location. We're just going to use here, since I'm over in Washington, we're just going to use a Seattle zip code, and we'll call this Main Street and First Street. You can put in the county if you have it. This is King County. And then this bit of information populates on the cloud and also your info tab on that side of the left side of your client. And then we go to control. We can configure a TS2, a TS1, or an ITS, which is also kind of our ATC component. But this is populated automatically for you based on the option card that is already installed. So you don't do this in the wizard. It tells you, hey, you've got a TS2 card in there, so you're good to go. We're going to do a TS2 on this one. The max recall is on default. We typically like to leave that on all of that. So that's setting a loss of comms to that camera or to that location. The detection zones would be defaulting to your max time for that phase, right? If you have it off, it'll default to your minimum time on that phase. So it's defaulted to on, and this will set the tone for everything that we do moving forward. Delete stationary is a primary function for maybe streets where you have multi-use lanes where they can be parking sometimes of the day, and a through or a right-hand turn lane at other times of the day. So what this would do would be those vehicles that are parked on the side of the road during the parking time, you can set a time limit. And when that vehicle is stationary after 3 minutes, that vehicle then sink into the background and the system would ignore it. So it wouldn't put in calls. So that function, that would be probably the primary use case of that function. Network settings are all done through the web-based interface, as well as the date and time. So all of that, that would be a totally different webinar just to go through some of those things, which we should probably get on the calendar. All right, so now that we have the site kind of basically identified here with the location, notice when we did put the postal code in, it automatically populated the longitude and latitude. So there's a few things that are really important for basic system function. The location on Earth where you're running is important. The time of day, which I don't think, yeah, we can't do this here. The time of day is important, so you want to make sure that we're setting that current. Everything that's shipping from our factory is Eastern Standard Time default, so you've got to make sure you go in and adjust the time zone to fit where you're located. And then our direction north. Those things are very important for system performance. So we'll look over here. We're going to start with this first Bell camera. We'll go to camera settings over on the top left. We were just over at site settings. Now to camera settings. Let's go ahead and come up with a name for this site. We're just gonna assume northbound is here, so this will be the northwest corner Bell camera. So you put something like that in your label scheme. That way you can easily identify what camera view you're looking at. Then you're going to adjust the north heading. In this case, we're just going to point straight north, parallel with this flow of traffic on this approach. So this southbound, guys, we'll just assume this is southbound, northbound, westbound, and eastbound for our configuration settings. And then you got to set the height of the camera. Typically, you're going to use a laser measuring tape for this, and you're going to want to hit the rim of the camera to the ground. So I'll measure it at my height, which I know I'm about 6 feet tall, so I'll shoot it up. I'll get the height, 29 feet, and then I'll add 6 feet, so the camera height is approximately 35 feet. You want to get within the nearest foot, and the height is important, right? You can also drop tape line down from the camera if you're in a bucket to the roadway. That's a way to do it. If it's windy, you may have more problems with that. Again, we typically use a laser. If you're in a bucket and you got a laser, it's really easy to just aim it from the rim back down to the street and get a quick measurement on that as well. So it is important to measure this. If you don't, you leave it at 16 feet, you may have some minor performance issues. So it's important to measure that. Typical install height with our Smart Mount kit, I would say, is probably over 35 feet, but I'm going to go ahead and stick with 35 for these purposes. And so now we've got the basic camera settings complete. So if I come over here to the Bell camera and I click on it, I can see that we've labeled this correctly, northwest corner Bell. And then I have this advanced camera that we haven't done anything yet with. So but let's stick with our Bell camera. Let me make sure these are all on fill, which they are. And we're going to start with road masks. So the purpose of a road mask is to mask out areas that are non-roadways, right? The tracking algorithms are looking for anything that's moving. That may include things that are happening in areas that we really don't care about, right? So it could be a parking lot, a strip mall, a park with kids running around. Bottom line is we want to make sure we mask these areas off. And we do that with a road mask. And it tells our tracking algorithms to completely ignore everything behind. So I like to do road masks from the Fisheye View. I think it's the easiest way to do them. And if we needed to do some fine tuning, we can. So road mask, I'll click where I start the click, I get a green box. And I'm going to finish at this box. So every time I click, right, I get a point. And we're just simply going to click all the way around to the horizon, right? I just put one click in the horizon way off here. And then I don't click again until I'm over here at this horizon. And it'll drag it for you all the way over. And we'll just keep clicking around all the radiuses. And then we're going to finish where we're starting. You're going to see all the nodes, all the points in which I've clicked show up as a yellow box, which we can adjust, right? If you gummed something up or you didn't like the way you did it, you can go ahead and make some adjustments. Not a big deal. And we hit OK, and that's a road mask. So I'm going to go ahead and do the other ones here pretty quick. as you follow along. All right. And then we'll do, it's important too to make sure that we get these islands, and you mask out these islands as well. And these trees obviously are going to change as the seasons go, so you may need to adjust your trees, your zones around your trees. So keep that in mind. If you have trees on your medians, your zones could be affected. In this case, the view of the camera does not obstruct the detection zones. So as these trees grow, we'll be okay. But you know, Pacific Northwest, you know, Tennessee, you know, Southern California, maybe not a big deal. Not a lot of green down there, but other places where you've got lots of green, you're going to really want to consider your trees and how they change over time, and maybe even the seasons. But,
Justin, we do have a question coming in. Should ped ramps be road masked?
Yeah, typically you're going to road mask a ped ramp unless you're doing some sort of advanced function. But yeah, we're not looking for peds on the curb. If you're going to do a pedestrian zone, this system actually is not configured for ped zones. We're going to do a vulnerable road user setting webinar in a couple weeks, and in that one we'll review those a little bit more. But the pedestrian zones, as we do those, will focus on the roadway and in the box. So we're not going to worry about what's on the exit pedestrian ramps that are stepping into the roadway. We're only going to worry about the roadways themselves. Good question. Keep the questions coming if you got them. We'll get to them as fast as we can. All right. Let me wrap up my road masks here. And then we're going to start doing the next step is object masks. By the way, you are going to want to mask off the medians too. So, you know, typically we go through mask those. Object masks. Now for this view, for these, I like to flatten out the field of view and then just pick an approach and then hit all of the object masks in that field of view. So an object mask is an obstruction between the camera, right, where the position of the camera is up here, mounted off of this strand pole with a luminaire arm, right? It looks like there's an additional bracket here, and then we're going straight up with the riser off of that bracket. So from the position of the camera, right, an obstruction is anything that's blocking our field of view to the roadway. So these road signs here, the signal heads, sometimes you've got a B pole that comes off these medians that you might need to mask off the signal head. Sometimes there's signs, no U-turn signs, that may obstruct a partial part of your left-hand turn zone. So this sign right here, it's not obstructing any detection zones. So this is not actually a factor here, but these ones would. So I flatten this out, I pick an approach, and then we'll go from here. So I'll click the road mask button. Same thing, where I start, I get a red or a green box, and I'm just gonna go around it. And that's it. Now, one thing to consider when you're on a strand wire like this, which, you know, the entire country's got a significant amount of strand wires, so it's pretty applicable here to most cases. You're gonna wanna account this mask for some swing, because these things move in the wind. So if I were you, I would pivot off of the ends and allow a little breathing room for this thing to move around. Because if this thing is moving outside of this object mask, it can trigger a false call on one of your detection zones. So this could be a good solution for that. The same thing on your street signs. These things are going to tend to move as well in the wind, especially heavy wind. So as you see them move and you see the pattern of their movement, you can probably do a better job of adjusting them. But typically, I try and give them a little bit of breathing room from the get-go.
Justin, we have a question from
Okay.
Domingo. You may be about to touch on this with the object masks, but he's asking if we're limited to 4 road masks. He saw that there was an island in the picture in the southeast corner and was wondering if you could put a mask over the island.
Yeah, there's no limitation really. How about this? There's no practical limitation on how many road masks and object masks you can do. You're gonna wanna cover up all of these areas that are non-roadways. You are. So yes, you do want to hit all those. There is no limitation. You know, for the sake of time and explanation, maybe I've kind of left some of these off, but you know, we can go ahead and get them all on there. So if we go back to Fisheye, I can see everything that's in non-roadway is masked off. Yeah, good question.
And James wanted to confirm that the object mask does not affect a detection zone, correct?
The absence of an object mask can affect the detection zone, but the object mask itself and what's behind it will not affect the detection zone. I mean, even in this case, some of these strand wires or power lines or telephone lines may actually be wide enough to trigger a call. You may need to go through and add an object mask over those wires if they're moving and triggering false calls. Typically, when I'm setting these up and I've got a ton of power lines like this, I'll look for the big ones and I'll hit the big ones. But I'll generally watch it. I mean, just as good practice, you should be watching your intersection after you've configured and making sure that it's performing the way that you expect it. But I will look at these specifically after, and I will see, hey, am I getting any false calls from the wires, right? Some of these are hard to see. What's a wire and what's a shadow, right? These are probably all shadows, and then most of these up here are probably the wires as they go vertical here. But I will mask these off if they're causing problems, and that will eliminate the problems. So let me do one more approach over here. Notice that there's a street sign over here on the outbound traffic from the intersection. We don't need to worry about masking this off. This can stay as is, but these guys over here, we're gonna wanna mask off each and every one.
Justin, we do have one more question, and I did want to note that we are getting close to our 30-minute time. This webinar was scheduled to wrap up at 2:30, but I do see that we have still about 59 people that are attending. So Justin, if you wanted to keep this going, please do, and we'll keep the questions coming in. I did want to let everyone know that we are also recording this webinar. So if you are attending this, we will send out the recording as well. Justin, from Paul, does one have to mask anything that is not in the detection zone?
In theory, no. You just need to focus here. I mean, this is the primary concern where your detection zones are going to be. You know, you do not necessarily need to mask things off that are going over here, unless you're doing some sort of data collection in this area, and you may have you want the vehicle to be tracked into that object, so or into the detection zone. So if you have a zone over here that's collecting outbound traffic data for whatever reason, this still wouldn't be a problem. So, but if you were drawing a zone back here, which I don't think you would, you might then want to mask this off. So typically, as long as it's not affecting the ability for our system to track objects into the detection zone, you know, on these outbound areas, it's not an issue. On these inbound areas to your intersection, you're definitely going to want to hit those. Let's kind of move on real quick to vehicle zones. I will stay a little bit longer, but I want to make sure I cover everything that I want to get through here in the next couple of minutes. So vehicle detection zones, all right, we're going to pick this approach again. So this was the northwest corner, and north is heading this way on our camera view. So this will be our southbound approach here. I typically like to start with the through traffic lanes. It's really hard to see that inside edge between the through and the left, but we're going to do our best. Your zone length will want to be inside the paint, just barely, and it'll want to cross parallel with the bumpers, right? As the vehicles approach, you want them to hit as parallel as possible, or excuse me, perpendicular. And then about 3 car lengths long is typical. After you finish drawing your zone, again, you only need 4 clicks for a zone, unless you've got a radius that you're bending around. And then we're going to adjust the flow of traffic arrow, real easy, just make it parallel with your paint. And then you'll set your movement. This is a through. We've got a dedicated right-hand turn pocket, so we shouldn't have any right-hand turn movements coming from this zone. We will call this zone 6, and we'll assign it to BIU1 output 6. The lane is 2 lanes for this zone, and this is southbound. And then here, this is where we would label the zone, and this becomes really important for the data collection component or just reference when you're troubleshooting. So coming up with a zone scheme, a naming scheme, is really important, and that you keep it uniform throughout your entire city, because it'll help you when you're pulling back your data collection. So in this case, we would call it southbound through. We'll just do a T. And then if you needed to do some more indicators on that, you could call it phase 6. You know, whatever works, some sort of scheme that you can regularly identify your detection zones on your data reports. We're not going to worry about extensions. This would be maybe an advanced detection loop feature here. And then a delay, we're not going to do any delays on the through. The free flow speed would be your posted speed limit for this area. Max recall, this was set to on, so we just leave that alone. Include inner approach. This is a data collection component when we pull a data report by the entire approach. So we do want to make sure this is on, and we leave the visibility detection on. Locking entry off, and a right and left entry could be a feature you use if there's a driveway parallel to that. We'll touch on that a little bit here. But we hit OK, and that's a detection zone. Very simple. You run through the left-hand turn pocket here, do the same thing. I'm going to draw my zones parallel with the paint. After I finish, move the flow of direction arrow. This will be a left only. By the way, if it's left, you can just click the left and it'll pop you to the, click through and it'll pop you to the left automatically. There's no other movements associated. If U-turns are permissible, you might want to go ahead and include them. We'll go ahead and leave these guys on for now. This will be, we'll call this a phase 1 protected. So if you've got a protected permissive, you can assign that as well for your phase 6. If it's just protected only, you can leave it here on your phase 1. And then your output, phase 1. So a GRIDSMART output is your cabinet input, right? So your detector rack input for your BIUs is associated with our outputs. Just FYI, sometimes that gets confusing. Lanes, 2 lanes on this left-hand turn pocket, marked southbound, which is important for our approach data. And then our options. We're gonna label this southbound left, and we might want to right facing. We don't need any extensions or delays, and we want to make sure including approach is on. So this is there's really 2 things that matter the most on these. That's your label scheme and whether or not including approach is on or off. All your stop bar zones should always be on. And then if you do an extension zone, it should be off. And let's just hit this OK. And now we have our 1 and 6 going. And let's do one more here for this dedicated left-hand turn pocket.
Justin, we do have a question from Paul. How would you set the phase and output for a flashing yellow arrow?
There's some features on our latest version that you can assign your flashing yellow arrows to directly. Unfortunately, that's not something I have enough time to get into. However, if you want to join our follow-up meeting on Thursday, we can address this flashing yellow arrows on the configuration. So we'll send out an invite following this meeting today to that follow-up. And that'll just be in a Zoom meeting room. So it's a little different. You don't register for it. You just follow the link and you show up. And that'll be 11 a.m. Pacific time, 2 p.m. Eastern time. So same time, but that'll be this Thursday. So maybe that would be a good follow-up on Thursday. So back to the right-hand turn pocket. I'm just going to associate the movement real quick. This will still be a phase 6, output 6, 1 lane. We're still working on the southbound approach, and we're going to label it here southbound right. And this is where a delay may come in. So we can set our delay. Maybe we want a nice long 3-second or 4-second delay before we trigger a call into the system. Now remember, if you're putting in a delay in the GRIDSMART client, it won't put a call into the controller until the vehicle's been there 3 seconds. But if you also have a delay in the controller, it'll add another 3 seconds before the controller accepts that as a call, right? So make sure your delays are either done here in the GRIDSMART client or in your controller, but not both. So that's an area that you just, you know, it's not going to cause too many headaches, but it's important that you understand the logic here. We hit OK. We're going to leave including our approaches on. And that would be one full approach, right? If you look at these, I can click. I've only made 4 clicks on each of these detection zones, right? I didn't make 35 clicks around there. If I needed to make adjustments to these zones as I watch the performance, it'd be really easy for me to do that because I can just grab a couple different points. I don't need to grab 10 different points and move them. If I have construction happening and maybe I need to make some other changes, again, easier to change when we have just 4 points. Some of us that are in snow climates, when we have snow banks building up and our vehicle traffic starts shifting over, well, we can shift our zones to match it. So another reason to keep fewer points, right? So if you got a big, huge snow bank on the side of the road over here, and you can just see the tire tracks are naturally shifting over, you can adjust your zones accordingly. You're going to need to monitor that, though, because if you do make those changes, when the snowbanks disappear, your flow of traffic will be off those zones.
Justin, we have a question from Jim Berry. Does the phase green eliminate the delay?
Like when, are you asking when the system goes into green, does the delay go away on that phase 6? Let's see, can I pull up questions here?
Yeah, if you click Q&A, you should be able to view
phase
his
green
question.
eliminate the delay. Well, I mean, once phase 6 is being serviced, then yeah, it would recycle over from the beginning. It would start your cycle back over after the phase 6 gapped out or timed out. Then it would be back to 0. And then if a vehicle pulled back in after the zone had cycled off of phase 6 in the controller, then it would be open again. Yeah, hopefully that answered your question. How can you prevent occlusion from a box truck in the through to the left lane? Okay, so that's a very good question. On this approach, we have this big, huge truck blocking part of our left-hand through pocket. So our tracking algorithms, let me move these zones back to where they are supposed to be real quick. So our tracking algorithms are sort of modeling these objects, right? And so as these objects approach the intersection, we're building kind of a model around that object, almost like a box, almost a 3-dimensional cube around these objects. And as they approach, that object model gets a little better. So the closer to our camera we are to the object, the better that model will be. So that's why we have distance requirements for no more than 120 or 150 feet to the furthest stop bar and no more than 75 feet to the center, because we want to make sure we have accurate models that are detecting zones. So the way the tracking algorithm is working is this object is being modeled, and as it's putting this box, this cubical box around this object, it's actually putting in the call based on that bottom edge of the cube. And if that bottom edge of the cube in the model, because we've got a good view, is mostly in this lane, mostly in this zone, it'll only put the call here in one zone, which it's mostly in, and that'll be the through zone. If it's occluding the other vehicle, right, we can track it in, and as long as we're gonna see top edges of it, we can then continue to track it. But if we can't even see the top edges of a small car, we would see it when it pops up here. And then we would pick that call back up on that left-hand turn pocket. But this would be a use case if you've got a lot of freight coming through in a particular area. This is a use case for a second camera, because we can mount that camera on the opposite corner, and then we can pick up this left-hand turn pocket with 0 occlusions. So we can definitely enhance performance by adding that second camera in cases where you have lots of freight. I know that city of Tacoma, down by their port, there's areas where they have pretty tight, small intersections, but we put 2 cameras on some of them because they have large amounts of freight moving through, and it really enhances the performance of that intersection. So generally speaking, the system will identify this object by its dimensions, and it'll place the call in the zone in which the bottom edge of the cube is in. So sorry, this is a little complex answer, but hopefully that got you to it. Next question, can you have multiple configs for a different part of the year? Generally, yeah, the answer is yeah. So as you save these, you're gonna hit publish, and then as the publish window pops up, you could put in a quick description of what this is. Maybe you're gonna call this, winter 2020 or spring 2020, and from there, you'll hit save, and then that configuration setup will be there. And if you ever wanted to revert back to different points in time, you can go to your revert log. So this would have all of your changes. In fact, let me go to another site that has a ton more revert logs. So that way we can see. All right, so this site that I was on earlier, you can see every change that was ever made is stored here in the revert log. So this kind of stopped at 2017 because I don't have an updated config file. But you can see every change that was ever made. So as long as we're labeling it cleanly, we can create seasonal detection zones. And you might just only have to make minor adjustments. And then if you were, if you had a spring 2020 set up and you came back to 2021 and you pulled it back up and you notice that some things had minor change, you just make a couple more changes and resave it as spring 2021, right? And then you would still have all your change logs. Also, the point here is you shouldn't be afraid to use your GRIDSMART system and not only just play and train on it and utilize it, because if you mess something up, or you gummed up your intersection with a mistake, it's not a big deal because you can just go back and click on the previous known working operation config and then revert back to it, right? And it would just take you right back in time to that point in which your intersection was working. So this is kind of a safety guide and stuff like that. You guys heard of the guys in Arizona that have a portable one on a trailer? I know that people use portable ones for data collection. We don't sell the portable kits. We just sell the system typically. And if you had a portable trailer or whatever you're moving on, then you can. I've seen it for portable detection sites as well, but yeah, not typical. Jamie Short, will the right turn lane cause a running red light trigger in the data if showing the phase? Yeah, absolutely. Exits on a red, that could trigger, which is an important reason why you can have your lane by lane detection, because if it's just a right-hand turn pocket and it's triggering exits on a red, well, you know it's a right-hand turn. Sometimes that matters. Some intersections are posted no red or no right-hand turn on red. So again, then you can still track that movement, right? I know in Southern California, they have those spotted throughout the city infrastructure where you'll have one intersection with no red limitations on your rights, and then the next intersection is no right-hand turn on red, and they've got postings everywhere, and they may want to track those violations and see how many people are actually following through with those. I think that's it with questions. We're also out of time by almost 20 minutes. I'm sure there's a lot more to go over, and I'm more than happy to spend a lot more time. You know, I can spend much more than a half hour this Thursday at 11 o'clock Pacific or 2 p.m. Eastern. If you have additional configuration questions, we didn't get into the advanced detection component, but the idea here is just to spur some thought and provide a baseline with some things. And if you can join on Thursday, we'll send those invites out and you can participate with that. That could be a little bit more free-flowing, topical oriented, and I can spend as much time with you guys as you need on that. But again, thank you so much for joining us today. We're going to wrap it up, and we'll pick up our next session next Wednesday regarding the Smart Mount 2025.
As Justin said, we do want to thank you all. He will be hosting a meeting, which is a little different than a webinar, this Thursday at 11 a.m. Pacific Standard Time. Unlike a webinar, you do not have to register to attend this meeting. You simply join via the link. It will be an open chat forum. So to continue this, please join Justin on Thursday at 11 a.m. Pacific Standard Time. We will follow up with that link for everybody. Thank you all so much for your time today, and have a wonderful week.